With less than 2 months to go until the start of the 2021 Overwatch League season, many community members are starting to discuss their early team previews and preseason power rankings. On the whole, these have largely followed a similar pattern, with teams like the Valiant being placed at the bottom, whilst hyped up lineups such as the Justice and Gladiators have joined Shanghai and San Francisco at the top of most lists. If there was one team, however, that very few people can seem to agree on, it's the Seoul Dynasty, who I've seen being ranked anywhere from as high as a top 5 squad to even as low as a bottom 3 team in the entire league. So what exactly is going on here? Looking at it from a very basic perspective, the Seoul Dynasty are a 2020 runner-up, following their 4-2 grand final defeat to the Shock. You would assume therefore, but unless the team has seen wholesale changes, in theory they should certainly be capable of challenging once again this year. But upon closer inspection, it soon becomes clear why the Seoul Dynasty are a real challenge to evaluate, and consequently, why this has led to such differing opinions from all sides of the community. Seoul unquestionably enjoyed a very successful playoff run last year, in a meta that really suited the players on their roster, in terms of playing to their strengths. But if you look back at the regular season though, you can see that this level of performance was not consistently seen, and for most of the year, it was kind of a lottery from week to week in terms of which dynasty would actually show up. They finished the regular season with a 12-12 record, average to good at best, but even that is deceiving, with 3 of those wins coming as bonuses from their tournament placings, meaning that in reality, the team actually only won 9 regular season matches. This would have done little to change their overall league standing, dropping them from 11th to 12th, but rather than them having comparable regular seasons to teams like Atlanta or either of the LA sides, in fact it would be more accurate to place them alongside the likes of Dallas, Toronto and Chengdu, all teams that were generally perceived to have pretty disappointing 2020 campaigns. In that sense therefore, heading into 2021, which face of the Seoul Dynasty should we be putting more stock into? The playoff Seoul that were genuine contenders for the Overwatch League title at the end of last year? Or the regular season Dynasty that one week could look like the best team in the league, but more often than not didn't play that well at all, being handily beaten by most of the sides in the APAC region? Before answering that though, I think it makes sense to look at what the Seoul Dynasty have done with their roster during this offseason to see if that makes any significant impact on this discussion. In terms of departures, the most notable names to mention are the off-tank Michelle, as well as Toby and Slime at main support. In their place, the team has brought in Animo after he left New York, with the Dynasty also picking up Sabiobi alongside him and promoting Tuyu from Gen G. So there's definitely been some changes off season, but for the most part the majority of his team has remained intact, with the coaching staff also seeing very little change. This means that unless you hold a strong opinion about any of the players that have left or joined in particular, it's likely to make very little difference to your overall perception of this team. One of the more high profile community power rankings that have been released so far come from Avast, who is one of those who has ranked the Seoul Dynasty very low, at 7th in the APAC region, only ahead of the Valiant. I find his reasoning for this very interesting, as having posed a question on social media about the Seoul Dynasty myself, I see a decent amount of overlap between those who are very low on Seoul for 2021, and consequently, I think it's a good example for us to look at when discussing the Seoul Dynasty power ranking dilemma. One of the reasons that Avast gave for his ranking was the unknown quantity of Tuyu at off-tank. If you watched the Dynasty play last year, you'll know that perhaps their greatest weakness throughout the entire year was the off-tank position, with the team really stumbling in a traditional 1 main tank, 1 off-tank meta, with Michelle struggling to develop synergy alongside Marvel and Gesture, or Marvel himself struggling on heroes like D.Va and Zarya when replacing Michelle at off-tank. These issues on the tank line, particularly when playing D.Va and Zarya, crippled Seoul for most of the regular season, and the team only really ever found success at the start of the year during an Orisa Sigma meta, or with a double off-tank pairing during the playoffs. The question then is whether Tuyu can be a solution to this issue, or whether he will also struggle like Michelle. No doubt Avast is right in terms of the fact that Tuyu lacks Overwatch League experience, despite a few appearances as a two-way player at the end of last year, but looking at his recent displays in contenders during the gauntlet, I think there should be a lot of optimism here. For my money, he was one of, if not Gen G's best player during this event, and whilst I'm not placing too much stock in the next cup held last month, I do think he proved then that he is capable of playing with the full array of off-tank heroes at a decently high level. But of course only time will tell whether he's able to perform at the same level when Owl starts, and I can understand why people might be hesitant about him right now. His point about SBB however is one that I do think I agree with. Fundamentally, what does he actually bring to this team in terms of his play? Aside from a certain style of tracer play, I'm not too sure which hero Sabiobi is undoubtedly better at compared to Prophet and Fitz, and as such, I'm not too sure how much time he'll actually spend on stage. I'm assuming the big role the team wants him to play comes in the form of his veteran leadership and help outside of matches, an attribute certainly missing following the release of Toby, but will that actually lead to improvement? It's impossible to say right now, And as some of you have pointed out, I think the team could really do with another flex DPS alternative to help cover some of the weaker parts of the Prophet and Fitz hero pools. A vast view of the Dynasty's support line though is perhaps the point I would personally debate the hardest, as he considers the pair of Animo and Creative to be quite weak. Now I'm not going to start arguing this is an elite or top support line by any means, but I'm not sure how you can think it's not good. Creative in particular had a breakout end to 2020 and was fundamental to Seoul's playoff success with some incredible performances on Anna. I can accept his back play is yet to be tested, but if his next cup displays on Zenyatta are anything to go by, then I don't think for 1 second that he's going to hold back this team on either of the most common flex support heroes, and I believe he even has the potential to really push on and establish himself as a top flex support in 2021. I recognise, however, that Animo is probably a more contentious factor, with the community having a mixed opinion on whether he still is a top main support player, and further, whether he can adapt his playstyle to work on Seoul. I personally lean towards the optimistic end of the scale, but I can admit that Animo could potentially be a weakness if he fails to adapt on the Dynasty. From looking at what you've all been saying as well in response to the posts I put out on Twitter and YouTube, I think there are 2 other areas of the Seoul Dynasty that really affect where people are comfortable placing them. The first being the team's coaching staff. Now coaching is always a very difficult thing to judge when you don't have a player perspective, but given the regular inconsistency of Seoul last year, in spite of the talent we know much of this team possesses, a certain amount of blame definitely needs to be directed their way. Given that there's been very little change in this department, I don't think it's unfair for the Dynasty's power ranking position to be affected accordingly, until they can prove us otherwise, following some consistent displays from Seoul. However, with meta changeability probably not being as prevalent in 2021, I think this could potentially help the Dynasty stabilise throughout this year. Aside from the coaching staff though, the other main area for 2021 Seoul Dynasty that I reckon needs some examination is the side's main tank position. Now don't get me wrong, Marvel and Gesture were instrumental in Seoul's biggest successes in 2020, both during the main melee and the playoffs, but I think this upcoming season especially, they could be the primary reason why the Dynasty struggle. Outside of running a Ressa Sigma or double off tank, both of these players have seemed to have difficulty coordinating alongside an off tank, particularly when playing dive. Both at times last year and more concerningly at the recent Next Cup, both Marvel and Gesture seem to be on a different page compared to the rest of their team, normally resulting in the pair feeding on Winston and Ball. From my perspective, this area is what will make or break Seoul next season, as if they can find some consistency and develop a partnership with 2U, both Gesture and Marvel could once again lead the Dynasty to success. But right now that seems to be up in the air, and certainly just adds to the doubts that surround this team. On balance therefore, I think this discussion has shown the difficulties ranking the Seoul Dynasty for 2021, with the team certainly having the talent and being capable of being a top squad. However, there's definitely still a risk of inconsistency, especially with little change at the main tank or coaching positions. And ultimately, the weighing of these factors in particular are what will likely determine where you place this team within your own power rankings. Like the majority of you though, as shown by the poll I ran, I don't think you can put Seoul as a bottom 2 side in APAC at this moment in time. Instead, I think it's fairer to place them in a 3rd to 6th position, a middle of the APAC side that could honestly trend in either direction. But that's only my opinion though. Now I want to know what your thoughts are on the Seoul Dynasty down in the comments below, as over the coming weeks I'm planning to put together a polled community power rankings, after which I'll be very intrigued to see where Seoul lands. If you have enjoyed this video though, then please be sure to leave a like and subscribe, or follow me on Twitter and Discord. Until next time though, I want to say a big thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.